A millionaire disguised himself in his own restaurant and froze when he heard 3 words from the night had unfolded in a way that was far beyond anything he could have predicted. As the millionaire sat in the corner of his own restaurant, watching the young waitress go about her work, he felt a strange sense of admiration growing inside him. Every time she passed by, he couldn't help but feel that she was different, genuine in a way he hadn't seen in years. She didn't care about his wealth, didn't seem to notice his disguise, and that was what fascinated him most. He had expected her to treat him with awe, or at least with politeness reserved for wealthy customers. But instead, she treated him like any other diner, and in doing so, made him feel like a human being again. He watched her hustle, taking orders, delivering food, and chatting with customers with a natural ease that made him smile. There was no pretense in her movements, no artificial charm, just a raw honesty in everything she did. As the night wore on, the restaurant grew busier, but she handled it with grace, never once losing her composure or smile. The millionaire was beginning to realize something. He wasn't just admiring her work ethic or her natural charm. He was admiring the way she made him feel. She made him feel seen, not for the wealth or the status he carried, but for who he truly was. And that was something he hadn't experienced in years. He knew it was foolish to let his emotions get the best of him, but he couldn't help it. As he sat there, sipping his water, he couldn't stop thinking about her. What was her life like? Did she have dreams of her own? What had brought her to this restaurant, working a shift as a waitress, just like so many others in the bustling city? His thoughts were interrupted when she came back to check on him. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, he saw a flicker of recognition, but she quickly masked it with a friendly smile. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Perfect," he replied, his voice steady but his heart racing. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a sudden urge to know more about her, to peel back the layers of her life and discover what made her tick. But before he could say anything more, the moment was gone. She walked away, back into the crowd of bustling customers, and he was left alone with his thoughts. For the rest of the evening, he watched her, observed the way she interacted with the other customers, the way she handled complaints with a smile, and the way she lit up when talking about the small things in life, the kind of things that most people would overlook. The night ended, and as the last of the customers trickled out, he stayed behind, hoping for just one more moment of clarity. When she passed him one final time, he did something he never thought he would do. He stood up. "Excuse me," he called out to her, his voice surprisingly calm. She turned, a bit startled. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. But then, without thinking, he said the first thing that came to his mind. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" She blinked, surprised, and then gave him a small smile. "You're not the first customer to ask me that," she said with a soft laugh. But then her expression softened, and she added, "Sure, I'd like that." And with that, the millionaire felt his heart lift. He didn't know where this would go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was doing something real, something for himself. Something that wasn't about his wealth, his status, or his name. It was about a genuine connection. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than any amount of money. The next morning, the millionaire found himself pacing back and forth in his penthouse, contemplating the decision he had made the night before. The simple question, "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" had set off a chain of emotions he had buried deep inside himself for years. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. For the first time in a long time, he felt nervous about something that wasn't business-related, something that wasn't about money or power. It was about a connection. He had spent so many years building his empire, focusing on his career, that he had neglected the things that truly mattered. Human connection, genuine friendships, love. And now, he was faced with the opportunity to rediscover those things. The clock ticked slowly, each passing minute intensifying his nerves. He had convinced himself that he wanted to get to know her, but now that the moment was real, he wasn't sure what to expect. Would she still want to meet him after realizing who he really was? Would she still treat him the same way once she knew the truth? These questions swirled in his mind, but he couldn't ignore the fact that something in him had shifted. He had spent his life trying to control every aspect of his world, but here was someone who had made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of genuine human warmth. At noon, he made his way to the cafe they had agreed on. He arrived early, a little anxious, and ordered a coffee to settle his nerves. He sat by the window, looking out at the city, trying to calm his racing thoughts. A few minutes later, she walked in. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, but there was something radiant about her. She looked around the cafe, scanning the room until her eyes met his. She smiled, and for a brief moment, all of his worries melted away. "Hi," she said as she approached the table, her voice soft and warm. "Hi," he replied, his heart still beating faster than he liked. "I'm glad you came," he added, trying to keep his composure. She sat down across from him, and they both exchanged nervous but genuine smiles. For a moment, there was an awkward silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence you share with someone when you're unsure of what to say, but you know it doesn't matter. "So, tell me," she said, breaking the silence. "What made you want to come here today?" He hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal, but he knew he couldn't lie. "Honestly, I just wanted to get to know you," he said. "And I figured, if we're going to have coffee, we might as well be honest with each other, right?" She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Honest?" she asked. "Well," he continued, "the thing is, I'm not just some guy you met at the restaurant. I own the place." Her eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't flinch or act surprised in the way he expected. Instead, she smiled, almost as if she had already known. "I kind of figured," she said. "You have that air about you. But I like that you're being real about it now." He blinked, slightly taken aback by her calm reaction. "You don't mind?" he asked. "No," she said with a shrug. "I don't mind. I think it's refreshing, actually." The conversation shifted, and for the next hour, they spoke about everything and nothing, about their hopes, their dreams, the things they had lost, and the things they were still searching for. She didn't treat him any differently because of his wealth, and that was exactly what he needed. He realized, as they laughed and shared stories, that this was the most genuine conversation he had had in years. She made him feel like he was more than just his name, more than just the money he had accumulated over the years. And for the first time, he didn't feel the need to hide behind a mask. As they parted ways that afternoon, he felt a sense of hope that had been missing from his life for a long time. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was certain of one thing. He wanted to see her again. He had spent too many years running from real connections, but now, with her, he felt like he was finally finding his way back to what truly mattered. The days following their coffee date were filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The millionaire found himself looking forward to each new conversation with her, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling of guilt. He had kept his true identity hidden from her, and even though their connection was real, a part of him feared that when the truth came out, she would see him for what he truly was, a man who had spent his life chasing wealth instead of meaningful connections. He knew he couldn't keep pretending forever. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet cafe, he found himself staring at her, trying to figure out the right moment to tell her everything. Her smile, her warmth, made him feel like he could trust her with his truth, but fear still held him back. She noticed the shift in his demeanor. "You've been quiet today," she said, her eyes searching his face. "Is something on your mind?" He hesitated, then sighed. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice soft. She tilted her head, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" He swallowed hard, knowing that the moment had finally arrived. "I didn't tell you everything that night. About who I am. I'm not just some guy. I'm the owner of that restaurant. And, well, I've been living in a world of luxury and power for so long. I don't even know who I really am anymore." She sat back, her expression unreadable for a moment. His heart raced. This was it. Would she pull away? Would she be disappointed, hurt, or even angry that he had lied to her? But then, she surprised him. She smiled softly, a smile that seemed to reach her eyes. "I kind of figured," she said, her voice gentle. "I didn't think you were just some guy off the street. But you know what? That doesn't change anything. You're still the person I've been talking to, the person who's been real with me. And that's what matters." His breath caught in his throat. "You're not upset?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not upset. In fact, I'm kind of relieved. You know why? Because it means you trusted me enough to tell me the truth, and that's something a lot of people would never do. And that shows me who you really are." For a moment, he just stared at her, amazed by her calm reaction. How could she be so understanding? How could she accept him, flaws and all, without judgment? You don't mind that I'm not like you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it gently. It's not about being like each other, she said. It's about being real with each other. And that's what I'm grateful for. So no, I don't mind. I'm just glad that you're finally being honest with me. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for days seemed to lift in that moment. She wasn't just accepting him, she was giving him something he hadn't realized he was missing: hope. Hope that he could still be loved for who he truly was, not for the persona he had built up over the years. They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt completely at ease, as if he could let go of all the walls he had built around himself. As they parted ways that night, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been scared to tell her the truth, but in the end, it was the truth that brought them closer. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to hide anymore. He had found someone who saw him for who he was and accepted him, flaws and all. As the days passed after their conversation, the millionaire found himself increasingly drawn to her, not just for her beauty, but for her authenticity, her kindness, and the way she made him feel alive again. She had become the one person he could truly open up to, the one person who had never judged him by his wealth or status. It was a rare feeling for someone like him, who had spent his life surrounded by people who only saw him for his money. He knew that he had to do something special for her, something to show her how much he appreciated her and how much she had changed his life. It wasn't long before he came up with an idea. It was a Saturday afternoon when he called her and asked if she would be willing to meet him at the restaurant again, this time under different circumstances. She agreed without hesitation, and the two of them met at the same table where they had first met. But this time, he wasn't the disguised millionaire. He was simply a man who had found something real. She arrived, smiling, as usual, and took her seat across from him. Her presence had a calming effect on him, and he immediately felt at ease. They exchanged pleasantries, but there was something different about the air between them. It was as if everything had shifted, and yet, in the most beautiful way, nothing had changed. So, she said with a grin, what's this all about? Another surprise. He chuckled, knowing what she meant. Not a surprise, he said. Just something I've been thinking about. Something that I think you'll appreciate. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it on the table in front of her, a glimmer of anticipation in his eyes. She looked at the envelope curiously, but before she could reach for it, he spoke again. I wanted to show you something. Something that means a lot to me. Her brow furrowed slightly as she picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, but not just any note. It was a letter he had written, expressing his gratitude for her, for the way she had reminded him of the things he had forgotten, what truly mattered in life, for the way she had brought back the warmth he had lost, for the way she had made him realize that love and connection were far more important than money or status. As she read the letter, her eyes softened, and when she looked up at him, there was a quiet understanding between them. This is beautiful, she said, her voice soft. But you didn't have to do this. I'm just me. He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. That's exactly why I had to do this. You're not just you. You're the person who made me realize I've been living my life all wrong. You made me see that it's not about the wealth or the power. It's about the people we choose to let in. And I want you in my life. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, there was a silence between them, filled with the weight of his words. She set the letter down on the table, her hand lingering on it for a moment before she met his gaze. You're serious? She asked, her voice quiet. He nodded, feeling his heart pound in his chest. I'm serious. I don't want to keep hiding. I want to be with you. And I want you to be a part of my life, not because of what I can offer, but because of who we are together. She smiled then, a soft, genuine smile that made his heart race. You've already given me everything I need, she said, her voice filled with warmth. You've given me the truth, and that's all I ever wanted. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to prove himself, to show off his wealth or his power. He simply wanted to be with her. And as they sat there, holding hands, the future suddenly felt bright. The millionaire realized, in that moment, that he had found something far more valuable than money. A real connection with someone who saw him for who he truly was. And that was more than enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new beginnings. The millionaire, now completely open about his identity, found himself reconnecting with his true self. No longer hiding behind a mask of wealth, he embraced the simplicity of life that he had long neglected. With each passing day, his bond with her grew stronger. Their relationship, though still in its early stages, was built on a foundation of honesty and shared experiences, things he had never thought were possible before. As they spent more time together, he realized that she wasn't just a woman he admired. She was someone who had changed his life. One day, they decided to take a weekend trip to the countryside. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a small cabin by the lake. She had suggested it, and he couldn't say no. For him, this was a completely new experience. The thought of spending time away from the chaos of city life, away from the responsibilities of his empire, was both thrilling and a little daunting. But with her by his side, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The cabin was cozy, tucked away in a secluded area where the only sounds were the rustling of the trees and the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. They spent their days hiking through the woods, talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company without any distractions. It was during one of these hikes that the millionaire found himself reflecting on everything that had brought him to this moment. As they walked hand in hand, he thought about the decisions he had made in his life, the ones that had brought him success and the ones that had brought him loneliness. He had built an empire, but it had come at a cost. And now, as he looked at her, he realized that none of it mattered if he didn't have someone to share it with. She turned to him with a smile, catching him lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft and curious. He smiled, back, his heart full. "I was thinking about how lucky I am," he said. "How lucky I am to have met you, to have found someone who sees me for who I truly am, not just what I have." She squeezed his hand, her eyes sparkling. "You're not the only lucky one," she replied. "I've learned so much from you too. You've reminded me that life is about more than just surviving. It's about living, truly living, and experiencing everything that comes with it." His heart swelled with emotion. In her, he had found not only love but a sense of purpose, something he had been searching for but never knew how to find. That night, as they sat by the fire in the cabin, wrapped in blankets and sipping hot chocolate, he made a decision. He was going to give her more than just his time. He was going to give her his future. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. She looked at him, her expression softening as she realized the gravity of his words. "I want that too," she whispered. And in that moment, the millionaire knew that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along: a partner, a best friend, and the love of his life. Their journey together was just beginning, but already, he felt like he had everything he had ever needed. As the weeks went by, their relationship deepened, but so did the pressure of keeping up appearances. The millionaire knew he couldn't continue to live a double life forever. Even though he had revealed his true identity to her, there was still a part of him that remained guarded, a part that held back the full truth of his past. He had kept it hidden, not out of malice, but because he didn't want her to see him as a product of his past mistakes. But with every passing day, it became harder to ignore the weight of his past. One evening, as they sat in his office after a quiet dinner, he found himself pacing, unable to keep the feeling of unease at bay. She had been quiet for a while, noticing his restlessness. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, as always. He stopped in his tracks and turned to face her. "I have to tell you something," he said, his voice tight. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "It's about my past," he continued. "There are things I haven't told you, things I've kept hidden for a long time." Her eyes softened, and she motioned for him to sit beside her. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" she said, her voice gentle but filled with trust. He nodded, feeling the weight of his words as they formed in his mind. "Before I built all of this," he gestured around at the sleek furniture, the view of the city beyond the windows, "I was a different person. I made a lot of mistakes. Bad decisions. People got hurt. I hurt people." He paused, struggling to find the words. "I used to think that I could buy my way out of anything, that money could solve all my problems. But it didn't. And that's why I've kept myself hidden for so long. Because the person I was before isn't the person I want to be now. I've tried so hard to forget that part of me, but I can't run from it forever." There was a long silence. His heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the air between them shift. But instead of the judgment he expected, she simply reached for his hand and held it in hers. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, looking into his eyes. "Your past doesn't define you. What matters is who you are now and what you're doing with your life." He felt a wave of relief wash over him, but at the same time, there was a sense of guilt that lingered. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I've done things I can never undo." She squeezed his hand, her voice firm but full of compassion. "We all have a past. We all have things we regret. But it doesn't mean we have to live in that regret forever. You've changed. You're changing. That's what matters." He met her gaze, and in her eyes, he saw something that gave him hope, a hope that, despite everything, he could still find redemption. She smiled softly, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe again. "You don't have to carry that weight alone anymore," she said. "I'm here, and we'll face whatever comes next together." His chest tightened with emotion. As he leaned in, kissing her gently, in that moment, he realized something profound. No matter the mistakes of his past, no matter the wealth or the power he had accumulated, the only thing that truly mattered was this moment, right here, with her. The future was uncertain, but with her by his side, he knew he could face whatever came his way. They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, letting the weight of the world fall away. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally home. As the days turned into weeks, the millionaire found himself caught between the life he had built and the life he was now learning to embrace. The weight of his past, though heavy, seemed less burdensome with her by his side. They had faced the darkness of his secrets, and together, they had come through it, stronger and more connected than ever. But now, something new was on the horizon. The call came one afternoon, just as he and she were enjoying a quiet moment on his balcony. It was from his business partner, the one person who had stood by him through everything. The conversation was brief, but it was enough to stir something inside him. "We need to talk about the future of the company," his partner had said. "There are things we need to finalize." It was a conversation he had been avoiding, but he knew it was inevitable. His company, his empire, was his creation, but it was also a constant reminder of the man he used to be, the man he was no longer. He glanced at her, who was looking at him with a calm, understanding gaze. She knew that this moment was coming, and though he had tried to keep it from her, she could see the worry in his eyes. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly, her voice steady. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." His heart swelled with gratitude, and he nodded. "I know, but there are things I need to sort out, things I can't avoid anymore." She reached out, taking his hand in hers, offering the silent support that he had come to rely on so much. "You've already come so far," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Whatever comes next, I know you'll handle it. With the same strength and honesty you've shown with me." The next day, he met with his partner in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom that had once been a symbol of his success. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like a place he was finally ready to leave behind. His partner, a man in his 50s with a sharp suit and sharper mind, greeted him with a nod. "We need to talk about the future of the company," he said again. But this time, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in his tone. The millionaire took a deep breath and sat down, ready to face what was coming. "I've made a decision," he began, his voice firm. "I'm stepping down." His partner blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean? You can't just walk away from all this." The millionaire met his gaze, unflinching. "I can. I need to. I've realized that my true life isn't here anymore. It's with the people who matter. It's with someone who has made me realize what really matters in life." There was a long silence as his partner processed his words. Finally, he spoke. "You're serious?" The millionaire nodded. "I'm serious. I want to live a life that's real. Not one built on power and money, but one built on connection, love, and honesty. It's time to let go." The conversation continued, but it was clear to both of them that this was the beginning of something new. As the meeting ended and he walked out of the building for the last time, he felt a sense of freedom that he hadn't known in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. When he returned to his apartment, she was waiting for him, her eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft. He smiled, his heart light. "I made a choice. A big one. She raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. I'm stepping away from the company, he said simply. Her eyes widened, but instead of shock, he saw pride in them. You're really doing it? She asked, her voice filled with admiration. I am, he replied. I'm ready for something real, and I'm ready to be with you, without the weight of the past holding me back. She smiled, her eyes sparkling. I knew you could do it, she whispered, and in that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. Together, they would face whatever the future held, with honesty, love, and a newfound sense of freedom. As the weeks passed, the millionaire and she settled into a new rhythm of life. His decision to leave behind the empire he had built was not an easy one, but it had been the right one. They spent their days in a way that felt natural and right, exploring the world, enjoying the simple pleasures, and building a life together based on the love and connection they had found in each other. His transition into this new life wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, moments when the pressures of his past crept into his mind. But with her by his side, he felt grounded, reminded that he wasn't defined by his past, but by the person he was becoming. One afternoon, they sat in a park, surrounded by the buzz of everyday life. He looked at her, a soft smile spreading across his face. You know, he said, his voice gentle, I never thought I'd be here, in this moment with you. When I first met you, I was just looking for something real, but I didn't know how much I needed it. She looked at him, her eyes full of affection. I didn't know it either, she replied softly. But I'm glad we found each other. He nodded, taking her hand in his. It's not always easy, but every day with you is a reminder of what truly matters. We've created something special together. She smiled, squeezing his hand. We have, she agreed. And we'll keep building, one day at a time. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. He had once believed that happiness came from success, from wealth, from power. But now he knew better. Happiness came from love, from connection, and from being true to oneself. And he had found all of that with her. Months later, in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, he asked her a question that had been on his mind since the day they met. As they stood together, hand in hand, he took a deep breath, his heart racing. Will you marry me? He asked, his voice filled with emotion. She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears, and without hesitation, she said, yes. The crowd erupted in applause, but all he could see was her, the woman who had changed his life, who had shown him that the things he had spent years chasing were not what mattered. What mattered was the love they shared, the future they would build together. And as they walked away from the ceremony, side by side, he knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would have its challenges, but with her by his side, he felt ready to face anything. He had found his home, not in a building or a city, but in her, his partner, his best friend, his love. Together, they would create a life full of meaning, filled with the love and connection that had brought them together in the first place. The journey they had started together was far from over, and as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter where it took them, they would always have each other.